My name is Henry Brooks. I'm 82. I was once a strong, confident man, a builder who built bridges, roads, and schools all over Pennsylvania. I could lift the concrete slab as memories do now, hard, slowly, but with dignity. My wife, Mabel, died 3 years ago. Since then, my home has become silent, like a library without books. All that remains is a ticking clock and a radio, which I sometimes turn on so as not to go crazy. I live on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, in a house that we once bought together. But more and more often the stairs creak, my knees hurt, and the windows cry with me when it rains. I have 2 children, John and Allison. John is a doctor in Chicago, Allison is a lawyer in Boston. They come once at Christmas, occasionally calling. It used to be more frequent, but over the years the phone has been silent for longer and longer. They say they are busy. I understand, honestly. But emptiness is not something you can get used to. Especially when you used to be the center of their world. Last week, I invited John over for dinner. Just wanted to see how he was doing. He replied briefly, "Dad, I'm busy. Can we talk via Zoom?" The face is blurry, the voice is not real. Not like it used to be, when he and I were repairing an old Chevy in the yard. The neighbors have changed a long time ago. Youth. They greet me, but their eyes slip past me like a sign that has lost its paint. A guy on a bicycle once shouted at me, "Hey, grandfather, move," and I moved. I don't argue. Do I have the right to do this? I also cook, clean, sometimes even chop firewood myself. But it's all slow, like an old tractor that starts only the 3rd time. The doctor says that the heart is weakening. And I told him, it is not weakening, it is just tired of waiting. The hardest thing is silence. Especially in the morning, when you open your eyes and no one is around. No one will say, "Good morning, Henry," no one will pour coffee. I cook myself. And I look out the window where my children used to run, and now there are only cats and wind. I don't want to complain. But sometimes it seems that society has already crossed me off the map. It's like an old house that is still standing, but no one enters it anymore. I became invisible. And what is most painful, even for their own children? It was an ordinary Monday. I went to the store to buy milk and bread. At the checkout, the girl didn't even look at me. She said, "The next one." Even before I had time to unpack the change. And when I delayed the line, trying to take the card out of my wallet, someone behind me sighed loudly, "God, how long can you wait?" I didn't turn around. He just lowered his eyes. And then I thought, how is that? I worked all my life, paid taxes, raised children, and was a respectable citizen. And now there is an obstacle. Someone who can be bypassed. Extra. He returned home and sat down in the kitchen. I opened an old album. Here's a photo, I'm holding John in my arms, and Mabel is laughing next to me. I'm wearing a helmet, with a concrete mixer. And here we are with Allison at the first school concert. They were still holding my hand then. And now they keep the phone in a silent mode when I call. I looked at these photos as if in a mirror of time. And he asked himself, where am I lost? Is it the world that has departed from me, or have I departed from the world? This is just the beginning of my story. To be continued. Because as long as the heart beats, something else has to change. On Tuesday, I woke up earlier than usual. My heart was pounding like an old car that had been without fuel for a long time. The night was hard, the dreams were disturbing, and the room was quiet, too quiet, like before a storm. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared for a long time at my slippers, which stood flat on the floor like soldiers. Next to it is a photo of Mabel. I often talk to her mentally. She was silent today. Or maybe I just didn't hear. I decided to go to the post office. It used to be a tradition, once a week I went there as if to a temple. There was still Mrs. Brenda, a woman of my age, who works as a cashier. She was always smiling. But this time she wasn't. She was replaced by a young girl with headphones. When I went to the window and said hello, she didn't answer. I repeated. She looked over my shoulder and grumbled, "Well, what do you need?" "I'd like to buy a few stamps," I replied, pulling out my wallet. "Which ones do you like?" she asked, looking at the screen. "Simple, ordinary," I said, and stammered for a moment. She sighed. This whole exchange lasted no more than a minute, but I felt like a stranger. Like a supplicant who disturbed the peace of the younger generation. And as I walked back, it seemed like every step on the sidewalk was beating louder than my heart. At home, a phone call was waiting for me, Allison's voice. She spoke quickly, like a dictation. "Dad, you know, I'm very busy. But I called, because it will be necessary for you to sign the papers on the re-registration of the site. It's difficult there, but I'll send it by mail." "Okay. I'm glad to hear from you, Ellie," I tried to interject. "Do you get everything we send? Do you read the instructions? I'm worried that you won't mix anything up. I need a meeting." "Pa." And that's it. Her voice disappeared. I was left with the tube in my hands. Previously, she and I sat in the kitchen for hours, drank tea with honey, she talked about school, about her first love. And now, a conversation, like an accounting report. In the evening, John called. His voice was even more detached. "Hello, Dad. I just want to remind you, don't forget to take your medication. I put a reminder through Alexa. She will warn you." Alexa. Someone else's voice in my living room that has become closer than my own son. And there was one more thing. Granddaughter, Sarah. She is 17. She came last summer for 2 days. I was sitting with the phone. I showed her old photos, told her about how we built the first playground in the district. She nodded. Fingers are on the screen. And only once did she look me in the eye. "Grandpa, aren't you bored remembering all this?" I wasn't bored. But it hurt. That evening I sat in a rocking chair for a long time. I watched it as the evening wore on. And it seemed that the sky outside was also tired, it had become gray, gloomy, just like me. And worst of all, I didn't know the answer. Wednesday started with chest pain. I barely got out of bed. My heart seemed to beat intermittently, like an old radio receiver that picks up noise and silence. I walked around the room, touched the frame of Mabel's photograph, and held my finger on her smile. Then he steamed tea, drank pills, and sat down at the table. But still couldn't find peace. I decided to go to the pharmacy. It was damp outside, and the leaves stuck to the soles of the sole, as if they didn't want to let go. I always walk the old path through the park, although now there is almost no one there. I am delighted by the smell of the trees, the rustle of the wind, reminiscent of Mabel's voice when she sang in the morning. I stopped at the bench, sat down, to rest. Then he heard a voice from the side. "Can you handle it?" someone said. I looked up. In front of me stood a man of about 45, athletic build, in a dark coat. The face was unfamiliar, but there was something real in his eyes. "Yes, thank you, I'm just resting," I answered. He sat down next to him. Not as young people, with detachment, but in a human way. "My name is Mark," he said. "I often walk here. You look familiar." I smiled. "It's hard to forget me if you've ever seen me. I used to build bridges, buildings. The people in the park knew me. Now, I'm just an old man on the bench." Mark paused. Then, quietly. "My father was just like you. He left last year. We have hardly communicated for the past 5 years. I was busy with work all the time. I thought I would make it. But he didn't have time." His voice trembled slightly. And at that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt that someone was looking not past me, but at me. We sat together for over an hour. I talked about my work, about Mabel, about John and Allison, about how the world had changed. Mark listened. No phone in hand, no rush. I just listened. And when I got up, he offered to give me a ride home. I refused. I wanted to be in the air a little more. If you don't mind, I'll come in somehow. I want to write down some of what you said. I am a journalist. I am working on an article about forgotten people. And I see that you are not just a name. You are a whole era. I nodded. And as he walked back, something changed inside. Like smoke that disperses and finally reveals the sky. Someone saw a person in me again. Not just age, not wrinkles, not slowness. A story. Integrity. In the evening, already at home, I dialed John. He didn't answer. I left a message. John, today I have spoken to a stranger longer than I have spoken to you in the last 6 months. Just thought you should know. I'm still alive. And I have something to say. The next morning I woke up with a thought that no longer let go. Maybe I can still be heard. Perhaps this is not the end. And for the first time in a long time, I took out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. For the 3rd day in a row, I wake up in the morning without waiting for a call. And not because he won't be there, but because I don't expect it anymore. Something in me sprouted like roots through an old concrete crack. I took out a notebook where I used to write down the phone numbers of the masters and the bus schedules, and began to take notes every day. Sentences, memories, fragments of conversations. I'm not a writer, but this is my life, and someone needs to hear it. If not now, then someday. On Friday, the doorbell rang. I slowly approached, opened it with a creak. Mark was standing on the threshold with a notebook and a thermos. I brought you coffee. Homemade, not from the machine. Let me listen a little more. He smiled. So we started meeting regularly. He wrote down my stories, asked me about the war I had experienced, about how I first saw the ocean, about evenings with Mabel when we listened to Louis Armstrong on a vinyl player. For the first time in many years, I laughed heartily. I started leaving the house more often. He went to the library where Mabel once worked. In the corner there was still her favorite table. I sat down at him. Inhaled dust mixed with memory. And then I decided, I will write a book. Maybe it will be just a notebook with my life, but it will exist. I found an old printing machine. Wiped off the dust, greased the handles. And he began with the first sentence, I was needed. And this is the most important thing. John didn't call. Allison sent the papers in the mail. I signed. But he put one more thing there, a letter. He wrote without anger. Simply, as it is. About how the father's voice should not disappear from the child's life. And that there is still time. A few days later, I received an answer. For the first time, by letter. From Allison. Dad, I read it. Crying. You're right. We lost you among the schedules. Forgive. I'll be back in a week. And Sarah wants to join. I held that letter in my hands for a long time. It was warmer than a blanket. And then there is a call. John. Hello, Dad. I'm sorry for being silent. I reread everything you wrote to Mark. You are incredible. I forgot who you were. I want to see who you are. I was silent for a few seconds. Then he said. There's a threshold waiting for you at the door. That same evening, I finished the first chapter of the book. And the next morning he brought a copy to the library. The young librarian asked. Is this a memoir? It's my voice, I answered. Perhaps someone old like me will read them. And he will remember that he is still alive. When Allison and Sarah arrived in the evening, we sat in the garden for a long time. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. I didn't speak. I just was. And that was enough. And Mark said the next day, "Henry, you have not only changed yourself. You brought me back to my father. I visited him. We talked for a long time. Thanks to you." And then I realized, life doesn't end when the body weakens. It is just beginning to speak louder, through memories, through actions, through love. I'm sitting on an old wooden porch facing west. The sun sets over the horizon slowly, as if it does not want to say goodbye. In his hands is a cup of coffee, it has already cooled down. Next to it is my book. It was printed. Modest circulation. At the local printing house. But it is real. Like every wrinkle on my face. In recent weeks, my home has come alive. John would bring his kids, we would play dominoes, roast sausages in the fireplace, and then they would listen to my stories. Sarah was recording some on a recorder. She said she wanted to make a podcast. I don't fully understand what it is, but her eyes were shining, and that's enough. Allison helped me organize old letters. She and I cried over one that I had been writing to Mabel since I was on watch in 1974. She whispered, "You were a better man than I managed to understand." I still am. Mark brought the first copies of the book. The title is simple, Hands That Built. Inside is my whole life. Not perfect, not ironed, not decorated. But honestly, I donated one copy to the local school. The history teacher read an excerpt to the students. And then 2 schoolchildren came up to me on the street and said, "The bridge that we cross every day, did you build it?" It's cool. It was more than fame. It was recognition. A look into the eyes. Smile. Humanity. I'm not getting any younger. My body is still slow. But inside, something seemed to ignite again. I learned to live not in waiting for a call, but in action. In every word, in every cup of tea that I now drink with guests. In every "thank you" that I hear from children or complete strangers. Sometimes it is enough for one person to look at you to feel that you are not forgotten. Today I read aloud an excerpt from my book in the library. People came. Young, older. A guy about 20 years old came up to me after sunset and said, "You changed my view of my grandfather. I'll call him today. Thanks." That's when I realized for sure, it was not just a text. This is a bridge between generations. On the table next to it is a new notebook. I started writing the second book. I don't have a name yet. But I know what it will be about a life that goes on even when it seems that everything has already been written. I remembered Mabel's voice again. She said, "A person who remembers and shares never disappears." And now I believe it. Because as long as someone listens, you exist. Old age is not silence. This is another song. Slower, deeper. But if you listen, it can wake up the heart. Even when the world turns away, you have the strength to turn back to yourself. Your story is not over yet. Write it further. Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.